Why did the wisest man in the world have a harem with 700 wives and 300 concubines? How was he influenced and manipulated by them to the point of provoking God's wrath for generations? The story of Solomon, king of Israel, is a shocking account of the complexity of human nature, the transformative power of wisdom, and the consequences of disobedience. The birth of Solomon in Jerusalem in 990 BC occurred amid a series of dramatic events in King David's life. After committing adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, one of his most loyal soldiers, David tried to cover up his sin by ordering Uriah to be placed on the front lines of battle to be killed. This act brought great disgrace to David. The first son of David and Bathsheba died shortly after birth, an event that brought deep sorrow to the couple and the kingdom. The arrival of Solomon after this period of pain symbolized hope and renewal, being considered a special blessing from God. Even with Solomon's birth, David's court was filled with tension and discrimination. Many viewed Bathsheba and her son with suspicion due to the scandalous circumstances of their marriage and Uriah's murder. Solomon also faced jealousy from his half-brothers, who saw his rise as a threat to their own claims to the throne. From a young age, he had to deal with this animosity and prove his worth in a hostile and intrigue-filled environment. Despite the challenges, Solomon received a rigorous education, deeply influenced by the prophets and wise men of David's court. The prophet Nathan, who had warned David about his sin with Bathsheba, played a crucial role in Solomon's upbringing. Nathan taught him not only the laws and traditions of Israel but also the principles of justice, righteousness, and devotion to God. Nathan's wisdom and courage in confronting David served as a powerful example for Solomon, shaping his character and instilling in him a deep sense of morality and responsibility. Under Nathan's guidance, Solomon learned the importance of repentance, forgiveness, and the relentless pursuit of divine wisdom, preparing him to become one of the wisest and most righteous monarchs in Israel's history. At 20 years old, around 970 BC, Solomon ascended to the throne of Israel, succeeding his father, King David. From the beginning, David had promised that Solomon would be anointed king, a decision that surprised many since Solomon was not the firstborn. David's choice was based on Solomon's wisdom and character, as well as the divine guidance the king received. David saw in Solomon the ability to bring peace and prosperity to Israel, essential qualities for the kingdom's future. However, this power transition was not smooth. Adonijah, Solomon's older brother, tried to take over the throne, taking advantage of David's old age and frailty. Adonijah meticulously planned, gaining the support of Joab, the army commander, and Abiathar, the priest. They held a ceremony to proclaim Adonijah king, seeking to legitimize his claim. This conspiracy seriously threatened David's promise and the kingdom's stability. When Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan learned of Adonijah's plan, they immediately went to King David to remind him of his promise that Solomon would be king. David, acting swiftly, ordered that Solomon be anointed and proclaimed king in Gihon, solidifying his position. Solomon, demonstrating great maturity and wisdom, reacted firmly. After being anointed, he acted decisively to consolidate his reign. Adonijah was initially spared, but after continuing to conspire, he was executed along with his main allies, Joab and Abiathar, to ensure the kingdom's stability and eliminate any threat to his rule. The impact of Solomon's request for wisdom was profound and enduring. With this wisdom, he reorganized the kingdom, promoted trade, established international alliances, and led Israel into a period of great prosperity and peace. His ability to resolve disputes and govern the kingdom justly and efficiently became a model of leadership. The request for wisdom marked a turning point that not only defined his reign but also left a legacy that endured for generations, establishing Solomon as one of the most notable kings of all time. One of Solomon's first actions as king was to reorganize the kingdom of Israel to ensure efficient administration. He divided the territory into 12 administrative districts, each responsible for providing supplies to the royal court for 1 month of the year. This strategic division, detailed in 1 Kings 4 verses 7 to 19, not only facilitated resource management but also ensured that the tax burden was distributed more equitably among the tribes. Solomon appointed competent officers for each district, ensuring that tax collection and provision of supplies occurred without interruptions. Solomon's administrative reorganization reflected his wisdom and vision of governance. He understood that efficient administration was crucial to maintaining peace and prosperity in the kingdom. By appointing loyal and capable officers, he ensured that government operations were conducted with integrity and efficiency. This innovative administrative system allowed Solomon to focus on other aspects of government, such as economic development and diplomacy, without constantly worrying about court supply logistics. This administrative structure not only brought stability to the kingdom but also facilitated Israel's flourishing during Solomon's reign. With a steady supply of resources, Solomon could invest in major construction projects, such as the Temple in Jerusalem, palaces, and fortifications. Additionally, the kingdom's efficient organization allowed robust trade, attracting wealth and prestige to Israel. Solomon's wisdom in administering the kingdom was fundamental to the prosperity and peace that characterized his reign, leaving a legacy of efficiency and administrative justice. In a strategic political maneuver during the early years of his reign, Solomon married Egypt Pharaoh's daughter. This marriage, mentioned in 1 Kings 3 verse 1, was one of Solomon's first significant diplomatic actions as king. Although not his first wife, this union stood out for its political importance. By allying with one of the most influential regional powers of the time, Solomon ensured protection against common enemies and strengthened his political and economic position. Solomon's decision to marry Pharaoh's daughter came at a time when he sought to consolidate his power and stabilize the kingdom. This marriage brought a considerable dowry, including the city of Gezer, which Pharaoh had conquered and later gave as a wedding gift. Besides territorial benefits, the alliance provided access to valuable Egyptian resources, such as horses, gold, and construction materials, essential for Solomon's building projects, including the Temple in Jerusalem and other grand buildings. The presence of the Egyptian princess in Jerusalem symbolized a new era of cooperation and prosperity for Israel. This marriage not only strengthened trade routes but also introduced cultural and technological influences that enriched Israeli society. However, this alliance brought challenges. The Egyptian princess, maintaining her religious practices, introduced cultural influences that eventually contributed to the introduction of idolatrous practices in Israel. This marriage was a precursor to many marital alliances Solomon would make with other nations, each bringing benefits and complications. The complex network of international alliances he wove strengthened his kingdom but also planted the seeds of future difficulties, illustrating the delicate balance between diplomacy and religious devotion. The construction of the Temple in Jerusalem was one of Solomon's most ambitious and significant projects. In the fourth year of his reign, around 966 BC, Solomon began the grand work that his father, David, had planned but did not have the opportunity to carry out. David had made detailed preparations, accumulated materials and providing a clear plan, but it was up to Solomon to transform this vision into reality, dedicating 7 years to the construction of the temple, as described in 1 Kings 6 verses 1 to 38. Solomon recruited a vast workforce for this monumental project, involving thousands of Israelite and foreign workers. Hiram, king of Tyre, was a crucial ally, providing cedar and cypress from Lebanon, as well as skilled craftsmen. The temple was built with great precision and luxury, using high-quality stones and precious materials. The abundant use of gold, along with detailed decoration, reflected the grandeur and holiness of the place destined for God's dwelling among his people. The Temple of Solomon was a magnificent and meticulously planned structure. Its construction combined architectural precision with splendor. The temple's interior was covered in pure gold, from the Holy of Holies to the outer sanctuary, creating a radiant glow. The walls were adorned with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, symbolizing Eden and the divine presence. In the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was housed, 2 large sculptures of cherubim with extended wings covered the ark, emphasizing the sacredness of the place. The doors and utensils were also made of gold, reflecting Israel's wealth and devotion. After 7 years of meticulous construction, Solomon's temple was finally completed. This monumental event was celebrated with a grand dedication ceremony, as described in 1 Kings 8 verses 1 to 66. Solomon summoned all the leaders of Israel, including the elders, heads of the tribes, and leaders of the families, for the celebration in Jerusalem. During the ceremony, the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the tablets of the law given to Moses, was carried in procession to the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place in the temple. The dedication of the temple was marked by abundant sacrifices and a 2-week-long festival. Solomon offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep in sacrifice, demonstrating the people's devotion and the grandeur of the event. During the ceremony, Solomon made a solemn prayer, asking God to bless the temple and continue to show mercy to Israel. He asked that the temple be a place where the prayers of the Israelites would be heard and where God would manifest his presence continuously. God's response was immediate and powerful. A cloud filled the temple, symbolizing the divine presence, and fire came down from heaven to consume the sacrifices on the altar. This sign of divine acceptance reinforced the temple's importance as a center of worship for the people of Israel. The dedication of the temple not only consolidated Solomon's reputation as a wise and devout leader, but also marked a moment of spiritual renewal for the entire nation. The temple became a lasting symbol of the covenant between God and Israel, a sacred place where the people could connect with the divine and seek guidance and forgiveness. After completing the temple, Solomon dedicated himself to a series of other construction projects that strengthened Israel's infrastructure and grandeur. One of the first undertakings was the construction of his own palace, a project that took 13 years to complete. The palace complex included the House of the Forest of Lebanon, the Hall of Columns, and the Throne Hall, where Solomon judged his people's cases. These buildings not only served as the royal residence and administrative center, but also symbolized the kingdom's power and wealth. In addition to the palace, Solomon reinforced important cities such as Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer, building fortresses that improved Israel's security and defense. He also developed storage cities that ensured the provision of essential food and supplies, preparing the kingdom for times of scarcity. These strategic infrastructures were vital for maintaining the kingdom's stability and protection, as well as strengthening trade routes and integrating the different regions of Israel. Solomon's construction projects had a significant impact on economic development and national unity. Improved roads facilitated trade and communication, while ports and ships expanded maritime trade routes. Solomon's vision of transforming Israel into a powerful and prosperous kingdom was largely achieved through these works, which not only improved infrastructure but also elevated Israel's position among the nations. These achievements highlight Solomon's administrative skills and his lasting legacy in the kingdom's development. During Solomon's reign, Israel experienced a period of remarkable economic prosperity, largely due to the expansion of international trade. Solomon, with his wisdom and strategic vision, established trade routes linking Israel to various parts of the known world, including Arabia, Africa, and even India. He formed trade alliances with powerful nations, such as Tyre, whose king Hiram provided materials and expertise for Solomon's grand constructions, like the temple and the royal palace. Solomon also developed a fleet of merchant ships operating from the ports of Ezion-Geber near Elath, on the Red Sea. These ships, known as ships of Tarshish, sailed to Ophir, bringing back large quantities of gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Maritime trade brought immense wealth to Israel, allowing Solomon to accumulate treasures and further expand his influence. He established trading posts and fortresses along trade routes, ensuring the security and efficiency of operations. This prosperity was closely linked to Solomon's initial request for wisdom and God's promise. When Solomon asked for wisdom to govern his people with justice and discernment, God was pleased with his humility and granted him not only wisdom but also wealth and honor, as promised in 1 Kings 3 verse 13. Solomon's ability to manage trade and expand Israel's wealth was a direct manifestation of the divine wisdom granted to him. His skill in forming trade alliances and effectively utilizing available resources reflected the practical and administrative wisdom that God provided. The wealth accumulated through trade allowed Solomon to invest in monumental construction projects and maintain an opulent court. Israel's economy flourished under his leadership, and the country became a center of trade and culture. The abundance of resources also allowed Solomon to maintain a well-equipped army and establish an efficient centralized government. The expansion of trade and subsequent accumulation of wealth not only strengthened the kingdom of Israel, but also solidified Solomon's reputation as one of the most powerful and prosperous leaders of his time. This success was undoubtedly a fulfillment of the divine promise that accompanied Solomon's initial request for wisdom. One of the most notable episodes demonstrating Solomon's wisdom was the famous judgment between two women claiming motherhood of a baby, described in 1 Kings 3 verses 16 to 28. This judgment took place in the royal court in Jerusalem, where Solomon served as the supreme judge. The two women, who lived in the same house, came before the king, each claiming to be the mother of the newborn. It is important to note that these women were not Solomon's wives or relatives, but rather prostitutes, as described in the biblical text. The dispute arose because both gave birth to sons in a short interval, but one woman's baby died during the night, leading her to switch her dead baby with the other woman's living baby. Solomon, with his divine wisdom, suggested a shocking solution to reveal the true mother. He ordered the baby to be cut in half, with each half given to one of the women. This drastic proposal provoked an immediate and emotional reaction. The true mother, moved by love and maternal instinct, pleaded with the king to give the living baby to the other woman, preferring to lose her son rather than see him dead. The other woman, on the other hand, agreed to the division, revealing her falseness. With this reaction, Solomon discerned who the true mother was and ordered the baby to be given to her, ensuring justice in an unexpected and brilliant manner. This judgment not only demonstrated Solomon's incomparable wisdom but also solidified his reputation as a just and wise king. The story quickly spread throughout Israel, increasing the people's admiration and respect for their ruler. This episode was a lasting testimony to Solomon's ability to resolve complex disputes and administer justice, reaffirming his role as a divinely inspired leader. In his quest to strengthen political alliances and expand his influence, Solomon married many foreign women, including Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. These marriages, although strategic from a political standpoint, had significant spiritual consequences. Solomon's foreign wives brought their religious practices, which ended up influencing the king and the nation of Israel. Among his many wives and concubines, some stood out for their influence at court and their tactics to influence Solomon's decisions. Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon married early in his reign, was one of the most influential wives. Her presence not only solidified the alliance with Egypt but also brought strong cultural and religious influence. Pharaoh's daughter used her position to promote the construction of temples and shrines dedicated to Egyptian gods, persuading Solomon to tolerate and even support these practices to maintain the alliance. Her beauty and refinement, qualities appreciated by Solomon, deepened her influence. Another notable figure was the Sidonian princess, who brought the worship of Ashtoreth, the goddess of fertility and love. She used her beauty and seduction to win Solomon's favor, convincing him to build altars for her goddess in Jerusalem. Her charm and persuasion led Solomon to allow cults that directly conflicted with the worship of the God of Israel. Her ability to manipulate his emotions and desires was an effective tactic to ensure her demands were met. Among Solomon's many wives, the Moabite princess was often mentioned as the most beautiful and seductive. Her appearance and grace captured Solomon's heart, making her a powerful figure at court. She used her beauty and charm to influence the king, persuading him to allow the worship of Chemosh, the god of the Moabites. Her ability to enchant and manipulate Solomon became a powerful tool in introducing idolatrous practices in Israel. Despite the many foreign influences, Solomon's true love can be reflected in the Song of Solomon, where he expresses intense passion and adoration for an unspecified woman. Although there is no clear and direct mention of this woman's identity in the sacred texts, some scholars suggest it could be Naamah, the Ammonite, mother of Rehoboam, Solomon's successor. The relationship between Solomon and Naamah, although politically significant, may also have been marked by deep personal affection, as suggested by the importance given to her in other biblical contexts. As Solomon aged, the influence of his many foreign wives led to the introduction of idolatry in Israel. Initially, Solomon allowed his wives to build altars and shrines for their gods in Jerusalem as a gesture of religious tolerance. However, this tolerance evolved into a broader acceptance of idolatrous practices, with Solomon erecting altars for gods such as Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Chemosh on the hills around Jerusalem. This grave transgression against divine commandments marked Solomon's departure from God's ways. God became deeply angered by Solomon's disobedience, as he had received unparalleled wisdom and blessings but still deviated from divine commandments. In 1 Kings 11 verses 9-13, God announces that as punishment, the kingdom would be divided after Solomon's death, resulting in the separation of the tribes of Israel and Judah. This act of idolatry not only compromised Solomon's personal devotion, but also contaminated the people of Israel. Many followed their king's example, adopting idolatrous practices and turning away from exclusive worship of the God of Israel, weakening the nation's spiritual purity. Solomon's trajectory, from a wise and devout king to a ruler who permitted idolatry, serves as a powerful warning. His story shows how even the wisest can be corrupted by negative influence and complacency. The introduction of idolatry marked the beginning of the decline of a kingdom that, under Solomon's leadership, had reached a peak of prosperity and peace. This final deviation had lasting repercussions, setting the stage for division and subsequent conflicts. Solomon's disobedience and the introduction of idolatry in Israel did not go unnoticed by God's prophets. One of the most prominent prophets to rebuke Solomon was Ahijah the Shilonite. Ahijah was sent by God to confront the king and announce the consequences of his actions. He prophesied that the kingdom would be divided as a direct result of Solomon's unfaithfulness, fulfilling God's warning about idolatry and disobedience. Ahijah encountered Jeroboam, an official in Solomon's government, and delivered a symbolic message. Tearing his new cloak into 12 pieces, Ahijah gave 10 pieces to Jeroboam, symbolizing that he would rule over 10 of Israel's tribes. This prophecy was a clear sign of the impending division of the kingdom, a punishment for Solomon's unfaithfulness. Ahijah's action underscored the seriousness of the situation and the inevitability of divine judgment. In addition to Ahijah, other prophets and religious leaders also condemned idolatrous practices and exhorted the people to repentance. They warned of the consequences of spiritual unfaithfulness and called for the restoration of exclusive worship of the God of Israel. However, the influence of Solomon and his foreign wives, along with the people's widespread acceptance of pagan practices, made the prophet's task difficult. Solomon's reign, though marked by great wisdom and prosperity, was tumultuous with deep internal conflicts. With 700 wives and 300 concubines, Solomon constantly found himself torn between pleasing his numerous foreign wives and remaining faithful to the God of Israel. Each of these women brought their own beliefs and religious practices, pressuring Solomon to accept and incorporate these traditions into the kingdom. This effort to maintain domestic peace often clashed with divine commandments, creating a significant internal dilemma for the king. Solomon knew his primary obligation was to God and to maintain Israel's spiritual purity. However, the desire to please his wives and keep harmony in his vast and diverse harem led Solomon to compromise his faith. Idolatry, which began as a gesture of tolerance and diplomacy, turned into a serious spiritual deviation, affecting not only Solomon but also the people of Israel. Imagine the internal struggle of such a wise man, knowing he was disobeying God but feeling pressured to meet his wife's personal and political demands. The impact of these conflicts was devastating. By trying to please his wives, Solomon allowed idolatrous practices to spread throughout the kingdom, corrupting the people's faith and violating divine commandments. This period of idolatry resulted in God's wrath and the prophecy of the kingdom's division after his death. Solomon's internal battle between his religious responsibilities and external pressures serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of straying from God's ways in favor of personal desires. Solomon, endowed with incomparable wisdom and wealth, succumbed to internal conflicts that distanced him from God, challenging us to reflect on our own struggles between faith and worldly commitments. Have you ever faced a situation in your life where you chose to please someone instead of the Lord? After Solomon's death in 931 BC, the consequences of his spiritual deviations manifested dramatically. As prophesied by Ahijah, the kingdom of Israel was divided, resulting in a fragmented nation. Rehoboam, Solomon's son with his wife Naamah the Ammonite, assumed the throne, but his lack of wisdom and harshness alienated the 10 northern tribes, which separated and formed the kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam's leadership. Rehoboam, advised by inexperienced youths, rejected the wisdom of the elders who had served his father. When the people of Israel requested relief from the heavy taxes and forced labor imposed by Solomon, Rehoboam responded with even greater severity, declaring that his rule would be harsher than his father's. This rash and arrogant decision provoked a rebellion, leading the 10 northern tribes to separate and crown Jeroboam as their king. Only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam, forming the kingdom of Judah. The division of the kingdom had lasting and devastating consequences. Israel and Judah, now separate kingdoms, frequently conflicted with each other, weakening themselves mutually. Idolatry, introduced by Solomon and exacerbated by Jeroboam, became even more prevalent in the northern kingdom, leading both kingdoms into periods of spiritual and moral decline. The division also weakened the political position of Israel and Judah, making them more vulnerable to invasions and conquests by foreign powers. The division of the kingdom after Solomon's death is a testament to the consequences of straying from God's ways. Solomon's choice to please his foreign wives over his devotion to God not only corrupted his own faith but also laid the groundwork for the ruin of his descendants and kingdom. The story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of wise and godly leadership and the severe repercussions of disobedience to divine commandments. Solomon's temple, also known as the First Temple, was a monumental legacy. It became the center of religious worship and a symbol of God's presence among his people. It was a symbol of the wealth, architectural skill, and devotion of the king and the people of Israel. Undoubtedly, it was a marvel of its time, using precious materials such as cedar from Lebanon and an abundance of gold. Culturally, it became a central point of Israelite identity, gathering the people around their traditions and religious festivals. Spiritually, it symbolized the covenant between God and Israel, with the Holy of Holies housing the Ark of the Covenant, representing God's presence and his promise of protection and blessings for his people. Even after its destruction by the Babylonians in 586 BC, the impact of Solomon's temple continued to be felt. Its destruction was seen as divine punishment for the people's unfaithfulness, but also as a call to repentance and renewal of faith. The Second Temple was built around 516 BC, under the leadership of Zerubbabel, with the permission of the Persian king Cyrus, who had conquered Babylon. Although the Second Temple was expanded and beautified by Herod the Great centuries later, it too was destroyed, this time by the Romans, in 70 AD. Today, the site where the temple stood is known as the Temple Mount, and the western wall is all that remains of the Second Temple. During his reign, Solomon wrote many proverbs, songs, and wisdom texts that reflect the wisdom he received from God, his observation of human nature, and his devotion. 1 Kings 4 verse 32 informs us that Solomon wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. Solomon's proverbs, probably written during years of peace and prosperity, address themes such as justice, diligence, honesty, and the fear of the Lord. These proverbs offer practical guidance for living righteously and piously, reflecting the wisdom Solomon applied in his governance. In addition to Proverbs, Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes and the Song of Solomon at different times in his life. Ecclesiastes, a book of philosophical reflections on the meaning of life and the pursuit of happiness, was probably written in the later years of his reign when Solomon had a more mature perspective on earthly achievements. In it, he explores the futility of wealth without a relationship with God, concluding that the fear of the Lord is the true purpose of life. The Song of Solomon, celebrating romantic love and the beauty of the marital relationship, may have been written during Solomon's younger and more vibrant years, reflecting the joy and passion of that period. Solomon's writings left a lasting impact on Jewish and Christian wisdom literature. His ability to capture the essence of divine wisdom and apply it to everyday life made his proverbs and songs a fundamental part of the Bible. The depth and universality of his reflections continue to inspire and guide people of all cultures and eras, demonstrating that the wisdom granted to Solomon by God transcends the barriers of time and space. Solomon's story serves as a powerful lesson on the importance of faithfulness to God and the consequences of disobedience. Solomon began his reign with great wisdom and devotion, building the temple and governing justly. However, as he aged, he allowed himself to be influenced by his many foreign wives, who brought idolatrous practices to Israel. This spiritual unfaithfulness resulted in God's wrath and the eventual division of the kingdom. Solomon's life illustrates that even those blessed with great wisdom and divine blessings can stray from the right path if they do not remain faithful to God. His choices, motivated by personal desires and external pressures, led to the spiritual corruption of Israel and the kingdom's fragmentation after his death. Solomon's story is a warning about the dangers of compromising faith in exchange for comfort, power, or approval from others. This lesson of faithfulness is as relevant today as it was in Solomon's time. Solomon's trajectory challenges us to reflect on our own lives and consider if we are placing anything above our devotion to God. Are we allowing external influences to corrupt our faith? Are we compromising our values due to social or personal pressures? Solomon's story reminds us that true wisdom and prosperity come from faithfulness to God and obedience to His commandments. How can we apply these lessons in our lives? Reflect on the choices you make daily and whether they align with divine purposes. And remember, true wisdom comes from God and faithfulness to Him. Are you ready to live a life of wisdom and faithfulness? If you want to continue learning and growing spiritually, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate notifications so you don't miss any important content. And comment on what impressed you the most in Solomon's story. Solomon's story shows us that despite the great wisdom and prosperity he enjoyed, he also faced challenges and made mistakes with lasting consequences. His life is a powerful lesson on the importance of faithfulness to God and the choices we make. How can we apply Solomon's wisdom to our own lives? What can we learn from his successes and failures? Take a moment to reflect on his highs and lows. Use his experiences to guide you with wisdom in your own life. See you in the next video.